I'm naturally predisposed to not believe Tony when he says something is science. And that was his explanation on the
cold immersion is what it's called.
Cold immersion. So you already sound like the authority in the studio on this. So
I told Billy about this like 2 years ago, and he laughed me off and said, "You're an idiot. You're stupid." And then 2 years later, he's like, "Hey guys, cold showers. Isn't that cool?" And I'm like, "Guy, what?"
I don't think
that sounded just like me.
That's a word for word transcription.
He didn't say this to me 2 years ago.
When did I say it to you?
You've just been saying that you like to do a cold plunge.
Mm-hmm. Cold showers.
No, not cold. Cold plunge and cold showers are
plunge
different things.
Plunge is different. Yeah.
Those are
They're
different
totally
things.
different things, but I do cold showers.
Okay.
Do you get the same benefits from the cold shower?
You do. You can actually even so cold plunge is like the highest form of it, right? Cold shower is the second. And you can actually do a cold face plunge, which is where you just get ice water. You freeze it overnight, then you crack it, put some water in it, and then just dump your face in it.
These are just hangover cures. This isn't actually science.
Well, scientists would disagree.
Okay. Source, trust me, bro.
No, Susanna Soberg from Sweden. She's an excellent scientist. You can look that up. Andrew Huberman from Stanford. A lot of places.
Yep.
I'm afraid to look these up.
You can be afraid to look them up if you want,
Well,
but
let's see.
they're
Hang on.
actual people.
All right, they're actual people.
I know who the Stanford guy is.
Susanna Soberg won a.
He's like a neurologist with a podcast.
Okay. Well,
Very good, like all the top neurologists out there.
He has time to do a podcast.
What is the science?
Get some patience. I mean,
Stu, he's a professor.
Get some students.
What is the science?
Okay, improve circulation and vascular
Those who
health.
can't do. I mean,
Teach, exactly. Boost the metabolism and fat burning, enhance immune function, mood enhancement, increase resilience to stress, improve sleep quality. I can go on.
What I read was if
All right,
I take a cold...
I'm seeing RFK already on one of the professor's Wikipedia page.
Who?
The dude from Stanford.
Okay.
And Joe Rogan. Oh, Jesus Christ, Tony.
All right, just because he went on Rogan. Hold on. Give me a second. Just because he went on Rogan, his advice and everything that he's done and gone to school with is completely out the window?
No, but it gets a big fat dismissal from me.
Okay, but I'm just saying. I'm just asking.
Yeah, it gets a big fat dismissal.
He's just asking the question.
I'm just saying. All right. So what is the science?
I just gave it to you.
I'm
Mike.
sorry, but I was looking at this.
I'm not going to give you a 2-hour podcast from what he would say. You could just listen to the Rogan episode.
I'm not going to listen to the Rogan episode, although I saw you did have Post Malone, and I'm hoping that one's normal.
5 hours long, by the way.
5 hours long?
Break it up into the week.
All right. Was it good?
I'm like halfway, dude.
You listen to it weekly. Trapped you. All right. So what is the target area of the
your entire body?
The entire body.
Yeah.
All right. And what does this do? Does it do anything to the immune system? What are the benefits?
Again, Mike, I'm not going to do reading radio, but
no, I'm not. It's not reading radio. It's just you telling me what Joe Rogan told you.
What does your doctor say about like the heart?
It wasn't
problems
Rogan. Rogan was
it
asking
can
the
cause.
question.
Like you can't.
Rogan was asking.
You can have heart complications if you go like heart under the cold water.
That's a myth.
Can the studio team find the photo of Joe Rogan doing a cold plunge where his nips seem like they were in the ooze? Joe Rogan's nipples are out of this world, and I say that as someone with bad nips. I'm not
cold
wearing
water,
my.
Though, you know what happens to cold water, buddy.
No, but this is different. Those
Agreed.
nips are a little.
Are
weird.
you worried about cold water? What are you doing here? Because you're fine with Ozempic, and I'm showing you story
You
after
keep
story.
showing. I'm trying to do a show, and you keep showing me, and they're all from the New York Post.
Higher risk of fatal complications during surgery if you take Ozempic. I mean, what are you doing just to lose weight?
Avoid the surgery. Boom.
Right.
Been lucky enough
How
to
about the
avoid
heart attack?
Been lucky enough to avoid
How about
surgery.
suicidal thoughts?
You know what almost gave me a heart attack? The PKs between Australia and France during the Women's World Cup quarterfinal. They went to 10 penalty kicks, and one of them had to get re-kicked because Australia's keeper came out for a line too early, and the poor Frenchman lady who missed hers had to kick it twice, and she missed both. They both got saved.
We didn't cover this enough with Taylor Twellman.
Well, he said it was a top 2 shootout of all time.
Yeah, but I have a rule.
It was so crazy.
After watching El Patron save PKs for Tigres, all penalty kicks should just become talent contests between opposing goalies. If you're allowed to hide a piece of yarn in your mouth for that long and then mime and pretend to be on a roadside sobriety check on your back line, this should just be part talent show, part actual meritocracy. And that World Cup shootout between those two countries was incredible, yes, but it could have done better with mimes.
I know what a meritocracy is. I don't think Lucy knows. Can you explain what meritocracy means to Lucy?
No idea. So you wanted Australia's keeper to not only make all of the saves she made, but also do a magic trick.
It's not too much to ask.
It was so much yarn. I just saw the video.
So much yarn.
He had it in the whole time, the whole game?
How?
I feel like that is a lot to ask. Where are you storing this yarn?
Well, I assume he went to the sidelines.
Magicians don't tell their tricks. You know that, Jess.
So did he have yarn set aside in the event that they would go? Clearly he did. Or did he see something on the treatment table and he's like, I can do something with that? And like MacGyver decided to pull up a distraction.
Feels like it should have been a yellow card, if I'm being honest. Feels like a little bit of a cheap tactic.
I agree. Automatic goal, right?
Automatic goal.
Look at this. How much, like using
He's pulling like a fake like yarn.
But it's all multicolored too.
Yeah, no, this is an actual
It looked
magician.
like it was actually in his mouth. I will give him credit for that. He did a good job.
I don't know what you.
But
what
we can't. We don't want. We can't have more of this. This
He
is
was
not gonna
miming to
be
his
the-
son.
Did the shooter score?
This is not going to be the thing that makes soccer the number one sport.
I kick
in
it right in his
America.
face, to be
I think,
honest with you.
Jess, you say that, but I do think it helps. All right, Joe Rogan's nipples are on the screen.
There it
now.
is.
Oh, my God.
Far more distracting than a keeper pulling out
Whoa.
6 yards of yarn of his mouth.
What if Joe Rogan pulled out 6 feet of yarn from his mouth right here?
I think he's got 6 feet of yarn coming from his nipple area.
Wow.
I've.
Cold water, man.
I'd rather never have to look at that picture again.
Let's throw it up one more time.
Could we not?
Let's throw it up one more time. Not the image. Actually, throw up ourselves one more time.
So creepy.
So this is a cold shower. He looks like he just got in. So there's no excuse.
That's a
for the
cold
nips.
plunge, though, Mike. Cold showers from the shower.
That's resting position for those nips. That's the resting. That's a resting position for those nips. That's crazy.
Off the starting block.
We still have no idea what the science is behind it.
The science is, I'll send you the podcast afterwards. You listen to it. I don't know what to tell
That's
you.
usually how this goes.
5.5 hours.
That's
No, that's the Post Malone one.
That's usually how this goes when someone who gets their science from Joe Rogan. Like I'll
It's
just
not
I'll
from
just,
Joe Rogan, Mike.
I'll
Come
just
on.
send you the podcast.
You're also
From
you're
Dr.
also
Podcast.
no Dr. Huberman.
No,
Susanna Soberg too.
okay. Can we check out her Wikipedia, please? Let's just make sure
I'm
we're
on it.
good. I feel like that one's just safer.
Now think about the children who are gonna mimic this goalie. This is a bad example to set. We got on T.O. back whenever he pulled a pin out his sock and signed stuff. So we gonna get this guy passed. I don't know 3 Americas, but you need to make a better example for these children because you're gonna have these children out here doing magic tricks and goals scoring, whizzing past their head, ball going whiz
Yeah, but
past
it makes
their head.
soccer more exciting, no?
Hey,
I mean,
that's
magic.
That's not how. Magic is not the answer.
Do we think Penn and Teller could have been great soccer keepers, but they went into the wrong business? Or like Chris Angel? Like they could have been onto something here.
Now it's not
Our
uncommon.
best talent are becoming magicians instead of keepers that also do magic.
It's not that uncommon for managers to sub in a PK specialist
That
at the
happened.
end.
That happened in the France game, and she was incredible.
Yeah,
Made
so
a bunch of saves.
So what
but
I'm
it's so
saying
long.
is you should get, because the odds are already stacked against the goalkeeper anyway. It's hard to save penalty kicks. It's so weighted towards the kicker that your PK specialist could be not as great a keeper, but a better showman. And you essentially have the mind freak. Can you imagine if you're setting up for this pressure-filled moment, Women's World Cup, you step up to the penalty spot, and the mind freak just starts levitating?
How do you even? What do you?
Get what?
That ball is going into the stands, my friend.
I'd go low. I mean,
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Ball on wheels
Five-hole,
on his ass.
classic
Always
five-hole
go low.
opening, if I've ever seen one.
There's just a rabbit. The rabbit makes the save.
You couldn't.
rabbit cannot make this. You can pull the rabbit out of the hat, but the rabbit cannot
rabbit
make
can't
this.
make the
That's
save.
where I draw the line. Yes.
Yeah, I tuned in to this PK. It was like 4:30 a.m. Greece time, but I had the FOT mob alerts on that game, and it gotten to a point that my phone was buzzing pretty well, and I woke up just in time to see the DUI roadside check being done. And El Patron was, for me, the story of the League's Cup. And I wanted him to advance just to see. I thought genuinely you couldn't rule it out that he was going to bring a live animal onto the
Pigeon
the
of
PK
some
spot.
sort, maybe?
Something. Yeah, a pigeon flying out
Pigeon
of
out of his
sleeve.
glove. He's like, oh, whoa. How'd that get out?
He's wearing sleeves. Classic illusionist move. Although it is hard with the goalie gloves. But I am sad to see him go. like to bring it back to the Marlins because there was a nice little nostalgic series between the Yankees and Marlins. Those two have an intertwined history. They took the field against one another in 2003. Was that the 100th anniversary of the World Series? That
I think so. There was 100 on the patch.
I'm here for your trivia night needs. But I saw that there was naturally a lot of 2003 related events. And I'm in a baseball chat now, and it's helping me follow the sport. You would think that if I was following the sport as quickly as I allege, I would not be wearing this jersey, but here we are. Mm-hmm. And Glenn Geffner, a former broadcaster for the Marlins, I recently learned no longer with the Marlins. That's on me, not on anyone else. But he has a Substack. And I just saw what was screen capped to me in the group chat, but I thought he made valid points. Here, the accusation, or at least where I was led to believe it was going by Glenn Geffner in the headline, was that the Marlins conveniently traffic on their history, but they've actually treated their luminaries and people actually from the 03 team so poorly that it seems disingenuous whenever they actually want to run back the nostalgia train and capitalize on it. Like they gave away these great replica of the oversized 2003 rings. And I do get that to a degree. This is a franchise that seems almost reluctant to embrace its past, and I do know that their past is sordid. But for someone like me, whose experience, and we don't have to relitigate this, I checked out on the team shortly after they made this trade with the Blue Jays, a trade that they inevitably won because it just seemed like business as usual. I felt duped by David Sampson and Jeffrey Loria that they would stop resorting to these terrible trades if we did what they told us to do, which is support this stadium. And I was a lead propagandist on this project. And now I'm one of those people that misses the Orange Bowl desperately, and I don't have any connection point to the Miami Marlins now. I have a connection point to the Florida Marlins of 97 and 03. Baseball at one point was my favorite sport, but this franchise does have a bad past when it comes to those teams. They have banned A.J. Burnett. Surprised me when he was welcomed back into the good graces of the franchise. They've literally booted people out of their offices. They don't have retired numbers. The Miguel Cabrera thing was kind of cool nostalgia, but it just reminded me of pain, of the worst trade ever made, arguably. I mean, you could throw the Yelich trade up there too, but
he sucks.
Yeah.
Who? Yelich sucks.
Yelich sucks?
Yeah, he's not
bad trade, but it can't be the Cabrera trade because Cabrera. Yelich,
okay,
not so great.
The Ozuna trade was an incredible trade. No one talks about that.
So good.
But Jeffrey
got
Loria.
Sandy and Zach Gallen for Marcelo Ozuna. Fleeced the Cardinals.
Jeffrey Loria is back in the news though, because with the 03 rematch happening they had good crowds.
They had one of the best crowds in the history of the ballpark this weekend. There were over 100,000 people over 3 days. Yeah, no, a lot of Yankee fans, and they'd be the first to admit it. There were a lot of Yankee fans there, but even when the Yankees come to town previously, there were not 100,000 fans over the span of 3 days.
It was the largest. I think it was the highest series sold ever in the park for a Marlins series.
So that's a combination of the Marlins are relevant in a wild card race, and the Yankees are the Yankees.
Yeah.
They just
I mean,
draw.
but
Right.
the Yankees travel everywhere. Everyone benefits from the Yankees going to town.
Of course.
And there has been, even if they're not good, and the Yankees aren't great this season, there has been actual seeds. If you want to fuel the "if you build it, they will come" argument that was made many years ago, there are hints now of if you compete, you can get crowds over there with the Marlins. The nostalgia hasn't really resulted in bigger crowds of the Teal Fridays, but they've actually got good buzz around the franchise. But do you think that this is actually a fair accusation by Glenn Geffner?
I think that the origin of the conversation even came from, hey, the weekend prior, they gave out these 2003 replicas, like you said, and they said, hey, wear it out specifically to this series. So it was an encouragement of fans who were already there the weekend before to come back out to the ballpark, which I don't think that's such a crazy thing to do. And when you talk about capitalizing on the history of the team, yeah, when Jeter first came in, and this ownership group was helmed by the forward-facing Derek Jeter, a lot of the things from their history were wiped away. A lot of those things were not referenced. The 2003 team was obviously not going to be referenced as that's a team he lost to. But over the span of years now at the stadium, they've added a little bit more back. This year in particular, they added a Marlins museum. that does commemorate the 97 team, the 03 team. You know, there's Hanley Ramirez highlights and stuff in there. There's a full sort of origin of the last 30 years. No, this ownership group hadn't really embraced the previous one as much, but now that you're back to these flashback Fridays, that you have the museum in left field, to me, this felt like reaching a bit on a weekend where you knew there were going to be a ton of people in the ballpark.
I mean, Glenn's Substack has been quite bitter and negative throughout its entire existence. So
no, it's a fair accusation.
I don't honestly even understand. I mean, I don't know why I'm saying this. I don't understand what the point of it is, to be honest with you. Because, like, if you are looking to get back in the game, I don't know that this is the best look for him.
Sour grapes?
A little bit.
Like,
it's all just very negative.
If you're the Marlins, why wouldn't you look back at the fact that you have 2 World Series championships since 97?
What are you going to do?
Like,
Invite
I know
the
the
team
rest
back
has been
every
pretty-
single year?
I know the rest
thing.
has been bad. It's been ugly. There's been some bad stuff going on. But why would you lean on those things and not the 2 things that you've actually done?
Yeah, Billy.
How many teams since 97 have won 2 World Series?
Okay.
I would exchange 20 years of horrific moves and horrific baseball and feeling like I've been fleeced by the owners. I would. For 2 World Series.
And before we go to Billy on this, I do think you asked the question, what are you going to do? Bring them back every year? That's par for the course when it comes to baseball.
Then you're 72 Dolphins. Like, this
Right.
is the 30th anniversary of the team. It's
not
the
a bad
20th
thing.
anniversary of the World Series. Like, there's reasons.
It's
to
This
have
made all the
these guys
sense
back.
in the
Yeah.
world.
I
This
love that there's a
celebration made so much
Marlins
sense.
museum. There's Chick-fil-A's in my hometown that have been around longer than the Marlins.
But I do think I just went to Camden Yards and they had their Hall of Fame, and J.J. Hardy is an Orioles Hall of Famer. You know, I do think that there are players, great players in the history of the game that had great windows of time here with the Marlins, and for whatever reason, the Marlins, be it the change in the ownership group, I think it's fair to say that they haven't done enough with it. I understand Billy's point about sour grapes, but I do think it sheds light on a fairly reasonable accusation.
Combination of things with the Marlins, though, right? The ownership changed hands right when, kind of as Jess pointed out, the team was old enough to start having a Hall of Fame or retired jerseys or things like that. And when your ownership changes hands, particularly to one of the players who lost a World Series to you, who doesn't necessarily want to honor that team, they had bad relationships with Conine and others as they first came in. A lot of those have been mended. Like, Conine was around on Friday, along with, by the way, almost the entire memorable 2003 team. You had Derek Lee, you had Alex Gonzalez, you had Jeff Conine, you had so many players
Josh
from
Beckett.
Josh
Whose
Beckett,
number
Juan
should be-
Pierre.
I think his number should be retired.
Well, and maybe
by the
someday those
Marlins.
guys will end up with numbers retired. It hasn't happened
But
yet.
what's the
for
argument here?
Marlins.
They haven't done enough in the uniform.
Well, when it was Jeter's not going to retire that number.
But
so.
right now, it would appear to me, someone that is not following the sport all that much and had a connection to years prior, it would appear to me that the Marlins have an impossible standard to get your jersey retired by them.
I mean, no, just whose jersey
It'll
would
be
you retire
Conine,
first?
maybe.
Yeah, but he's had 2 numbers.
Right.
So whose number do
But
you retire?
I would retire Josh Beckett's, and he's had 2 numbers. You can honor them like it's fine.
Those things may happen. I just think you're looking at a stage of Marlins baseball where they're just now starting to really embrace some of the old history in a way that is really fun. Like, that's why this weekend was so fun, because you got to see some of those names, and those names were talking about some of the similarities that they see with this particular team and making moves at the deadline. And, like, that type of stuff is fun where how many times in Marlins history have you had a moment where you're sitting in August and you're competing and you're able to remember an old team and feel good about the team that you currently have
Never.
and look back? I mean,
But that's
this is
what
one of the
brings
first times in
generation-
franchise history.
We're finally at the point in Marlins history where people who grew up with the Marlins have children of their own. And that's why you do the annual thing of running it back to the glory days of yesteryear, even though there aren't that many glory days. So you can tell your kid about Rob Nen and how he looked like your friend's dad.
What a
who
year.
would scare you.
Yeah.
I'm not as bothered by all of this. I don't even.
I don't care
understand.
about it at
Yeah,
all.
I'm not that
Yeah.
bothered.
I think, like, what we've
Were
seen
Were you bothered?
has
Were you
been
bothered
fun.
by Jeffrey Loria weighing into the fray?
He can just go away. I don't know what they're talking to him for, because he has a new book about art or something. Who cares?
Weird. I don't know why
did he
anybody would
actually
talk
say
to
for
anybody
the-
who
for
ran
the-
that team.
It's not even like he paints. He sells art. He sells something that other people do
But
good.
for the audience that
Be
doesn't
good at
know,
something.
what did Jeffrey Loria actually say?
I mean, I didn't go behind a paywall, so I don't know all of it. I'm going to have to find some way to read it. But what part of what I read was he said that Miguel Cabrera and Dontrell Willis left via free agency, which did not happen.
That kind of absolves them of the worst trade ever.
Not exactly sure what old Jeffrey's thinking.
It doesn't,
there,
though. It makes him look worse.
What? No, I mean, I would have rather let Miguel Cabrera and Dontrell Willis walk in free agency than lay claim to the worst trade in the history of the sport. Wouldn't you? The
Did you
Angels.
see Bruce Sherman high-fiving the guys when they were leaving the field yesterday? That felt fun.
I couldn't pick Bruce Sherman out of a lineup. I have no idea what Bruce Sherman
Oh,
looks like.
man. He was there. He was front row. He was high-fiving the guys after they were walking in. Oh, this burger.
I couldn't pick a Marlin out of a lineup, by the way. This is a side note. Who are the Marlins? I have never met one of them, but salute to all of them guys.
Well, why are they in a lineup? What crimes are they committing? They're just playing good baseball.
I have no idea what Bruce. I just realized that he's an anonymous owner and he's in town. I have no idea what he looks like.
He was at every game this weekend, and he was really excited. Like he
Big
was
sweater
chatting,
vest guy.
Big sweater vest guy. He
Yeah.
was chatting with all the
In the
guys from the
summer?
03 team. He made a joke to me
Indoors.
about wanting to sign all of them to this team, see if it would help make the playoff run.
He likes Bruce Sherman because Bruce Sherman recognized him on the Bright Line one time.
Well, that's all it takes. I mean,
Bruce Sherman
Was I
takes
not
a
supposed
bright
to say
line.
that?
Bruce Sherman does take Bright Line.
That's how anonymous he is.
shocking.
That's how anonymous Bruce Sherman is in this town. Could Jeffrey Loria take the bright line? Absolutely not.
By the way, Loria said Jeter came in and destroyed the ballpark. Destroying public art was a horrible thing to do.
I mean, he's right about that. The home run sculpture was the best thing that's ever happened to this town.
That was awesome.
And it's still there. You can still take a selfie with it. It's
like
just
that it's
outside the
outside.
stadium now.
I hate Lone Depot Park. I hate
Well,
the
this
artistic.
conversation's over.
I hate the artistic direction that Loria took it in, and I mean, I understand why he's defensive because Loria has a millionaire's eye when it comes to art, right? He has gotten into the position that he's been in, not just because he bilked taxpayers and suffered through the albatross of owning a professional sports franchise, but it's because he has really discerned taste. And I hate going through that ballpark. It's just a mishmash of all the colors. What's your favorite color?
Well,
of that
that's what
ballpark?
he's
All
pissed
the
about.
colors.
Well, he's mad that the colors were taken out, and he wants his colors and his art back. It appears.
I was pissed when they took away black and teal. Black and teal was great,
I just watched the baseball game. I'm not looking to see what color the corridors are. Who cares?
but I do care when it comes to like emotional connections because it's a franchise that doesn't have players stick around long enough for me to actually develop any relationships with the players. So I do like things like nostalgia nights. I do like running AJ Burnett out there. I get excited. If there's a Lenny Harris night, please, dear God, let me know.
All time.
I'd go back there. If there's
20 teams can have that night.
Can we just have a night dedicated to that time that Chris Volstad knocked somebody out after somebody charged the mound? I'd be there for that. We don't really have to throw up that image of Joe Rogan up anymore. And now you've added Vienna sausages to the mix, even as opposed to the salchichas he had on his breast before. Now we have Vienna sausage, Joe Rogan entering a cold tub of some sort. Not a fan. Jeremy, you interviewed Jake Berger, and that's a real name.
I did. And Jake Berger is a real name, yes.
And he's been good for them, yeah?
He's been really good since being traded here. You know, he's a big power hitting third baseman. And what was great about that trade as well as the Josh Bell trade was you were getting control beyond this year. So if the Marlins were going to be buyers, they wanted to sort of build cornerstones, and now they have both corner positions in first base and third base covered for next year. Josh Bell, a guy who's been a Marlins killer for most of his career, and so to add him to this team, and now look, Jake Berger has the walk-off over the weekend. He's got a ton of extra base hits. Josh Bell homered from both sides of the plate in a winning effort in Cincinnati. It looks like Kim Ng had a really, really, really good trade deadline.
They've also been keeping the offense afloat because a lot of guys have been struggling right now, and they've been keeping them in this race.
Those two players have really kept them alive over the last week. Like, their offense has struggled in a major way outside of the last inning against the Yankees. I mean, their offense has really done just about nothing, and yet that 5-run ninth, like, that's why it makes you sort of believe, all right, there's something with this team that they can get it done.
I didn't have it on the topic board that I'd be talking the most upon being gone in Europe for 15 days. I didn't myself think I'd be talking about Marlins baseball this much, but we do have a big team building exercise tomorrow in which we're going to watch the Astros and the Marlins, and it's a doldrums of summer. Allow us that. But one thing that did happen while I was gone that I wanted to discuss with the crew was the news that ESPN finally found someone to license their name to a sports book, and it all happened pretty quick. Once the news came out, you realize Barstool goes back in the hands of Portnoy for an undisclosed sum, and Penn, who has spent more than its market cap on digital acquisitions, after many years of ESPN trying to get this deal done with every single sports book under the sun, they finally found a taker in Penn. And ESPN gets to tell its Disney shareholders, we licensed our name, and we now are the largest shareholder of Penn. That's a win in the short term, I guess, right before an earnings call to say we found a way to generate $1.5 billion out of nothing, just us merely existing. But
Mike, it's a win for ESPN. Like
I'm not so
I
sure.
see where you're going here, but adding $1.5 billion, I know it's a gambling partner. I know it could go a lot of ways, but on the surface, adding $1.5 billion to your company of revenue, that's a good day. It's a really good day, Mike.
They tried. It's a good day because they generated revenue out of nothing, out of just merely existing, and they finally found a taker to take this deal. And the reason why it took so long for ESPN to find a taker is it's a bad deal. It's a bad deal, and to me, it actually signals sooner rather than later that Disney is going to spin off ESPN. I don't know to what. Apple as a brand is a bigger brand than ESPN. It's one of the few companies that can actually say that, but it would be more of a brand integration, right? If Apple were to go for ESPN, it'd be basically just to go for all of ESPN's rights and their entire intellectual property and their entire archive of sports. It'd be a bold move by Apple, but ESPN becoming Penn's largest stakeholder, if you saw what happened to the stock price, and that happened quickly, didn't really move the needle over there. The gaming sector is going to be interesting, and I say that as someone that is on the DraftKings network. We'll see how this thing plays out over the next couple of years, but the assumption is there's only going to be a handful, if that many, winners when all the dust settles. And we've seen spending go down from books across the board. We've seen books that have been known to spend money, pull that money back, and not take this deal with ESPN. I do think at the end of the day, there's probably going to be 2 to 3 books, and I don't know if ESPN's going to be one of them. And for all the people that would say, well, ESPN has such a heads up by just merely being ESPN, and it's easy to integrate.
No, but that's why it's good for Penn, though, I think. If you're not one of those 2 or 3 and you want to be one of those 2 or 3, and I agree with you, there are only going to be like 2 or 3 left standing when all of this is said and done, they'll buy their competition. They'll just buy them out of the market, right? But it's a good deal for Penn. Because you're spending a lot of money, yes. Obviously, you have the money to spend. But if you want to become a big-time sports book, attaching yourself to those 4 letters is not a bad idea.
Why would they redo that if they attached themselves to Barstool and didn't get exactly the ROI that they were looking for?
I have great respect, I really do, for what Barstool has done in a short period of time. It's not ESPN. This is ESPN.
And
all the games are on ESPN.
That's a solid argument. And there's actually a pretty good comparison. Look what happened with Sky Bet across the pond. They had the established sports media company, and they actually got a reasonable market share because of that. But I would say that's apples to oranges because we're talking about a mature market that's been relegated for decades over there. If you think that ESPN can just stroll into this game and be the ESPN of sports betting, may I turn your attention to ESPN the phone? Their brand can only take you so far.
I don't think ESPN thinks that. I think they just took a sweetheart deal. And you're right, no one else really wanted to pay that much money. Someone did. They took the deal. They're not as concerned as to whether or not this works out.
Brother, I'm with you. I'm never going to accuse ESPN of having foresight.
Well, I think the issue for Penn is that the market share for FanDuel DraftKings is already really high. And even in Pennsylvania, which is their best state, they're trailing very far behind. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, their stock went up after the deal was announced. So I'm sure, like, short term, yeah, who knows what will happen.
But 5 days
long-term.
later, it wasn't.
The problem with all of this is that ESPN's costs are getting higher and higher every year. And if they do want to choose a direct-to-consumer model, it could be really, really expensive. And right now, the entire cable system is predicated upon people that don't watch sports paying a really high carriage fee for ESPN. And now you don't have to do that. You can get more a la carte options or just pay for streaming options. And now that's getting more and more expensive as well. The short of it is
Disney's
making
bundles
TV
are getting
is really, really expensive, but ESPN has been able to earn a lot of money from people that aren't sports fans just by the fact that they've had cable. But now as cable subscriptions are going down, and also there's a lot of conflicting but sort of not great outlooks on what young people are doing. I mean, most of them are not subscribing to cable or watching TV. Most of them don't even really seem to like sports that much. It's a pretty scary place to be if you're a humongous cable giant that has billions of dollars on the line for sports rights for the next decade.
Iger came back to a company that had to deal with the pandemic, tourism being largely where they get most of their revenue. This is one of the most powerful, influential companies in the world in Disney. But Iger was an interesting choice. And it seemed as though Iger was brought in specifically to sell.
Iger.
Because I every single one of Iger's quotes, when pressed on ESPN to Apple and his relationship with Tim Cook, he says all the right things that will make you seize on, oh, I think he's going to sell ESPN. Putting ESPN directly behind a paywall and taking it off television altogether. He doesn't shoot that down. He adds fuel to that speculation. So I do think even this, it's just, I think, look, you mentioned DraftKings and its competition being the largest two in the marketplace. It does feel to me that everyone else is waiting to see who wins this battle or who's at least on the medal stand, and everyone else is just hoping to build enough equity to make themselves attractive enough for acquisition. And
to be bought by one of those two or three.
I'm telling you, that move right there signaled to me that ESPN.
But Penn's just trying to get on the medal stand. That's what they're trying to do.
Penn, this is
a desperate measure to try to get on that medal stand.
It's a very desperate to outspend your market cap by $1 billion in relatively short order. Fiscally speaking, and I'm not the most fiscally responsible guy, it is a red flag and cause for concern. But everything about ESPN's recent moves, from the talent sell-off to not renewing, to how they approach their business, to bringing Iger back, to this very move, signals to me that within a short span, we might see ESPN no longer a part of Disney. Hell, Disney, because Apple's one of the few companies that could just be like, well, let's not just talk about ESPN. Give me the whole thing. Apple is bigger than Disney. And I'm sure that's going to be subject to all sorts of approval. And I'm worried about the Pandora's box that might open, considering I spend a lot of money on Disney products already for my daughter. I don't want to make that even easier. But I do think ESPN, as we know it, as I've known it for my entire life pretty much, as it being a Disney entity, that move right there kind of signaled that it's going to be changing in relatively short order.
But do you think people care about that change? Like, it's still ESPN. Whoever buys it, it's still going to be ESPN.
We're nostalgic about ESPN. I do think people care.
I am, but as long as they're still ESPN and I can watch what I want to watch, which is the game.
But what if they're not ESPN anymore?
What's it going to be?
What if they're Apple?
Why would you rebrand the four biggest letters in sports?
Because Apple's a bigger brand. And it's not just in sports. Apple is a bigger brand.
So you have them buying it and then rebranding everything.
I mean, you could
I would just keep it status quo.
You can have it
we own it now.
You can have it as a tab, essentially. We see a lot of people that go through these acquisitions have a tab, and it's basically like the way that Max is. There's an HBO tab, right? And maybe they'll see the currency in having ESPN fully integrated to Apple. But when Apple's looking at the margins, they don't get blown away and impressed by ESPN's brand equity because they have more brand equity than ESPN. They're looking at their game rights. So we're talking about a brand absorption with them.
No, I know, but I'm saying part of what you're buying is ESPN. And so why would you change that? Like, you don't want to get too cute with the acquisition. Buy it, we own it, that's it. Everything stays the same. Don't confuse the customer. Don't do that.
We're hyper-focusing.
I'm not certain I would watch it if it's not called ESPN.
There's going to be.
I'm lying. I would watch it.
There's going, and I think we should also keep an eye on how Apple is doing with MLS. It took one big acquisition in Messi, but their global strategy when it comes to MLS Season Pass seems to be working. They're starting to hit their numbers. The revenue share it's gotten to the point, it's met the threshold already. And I do think the more and more we talk about Apple, and the more spectacular Messi highlights, the better for that, we can see Apple become a player in this. And if you've been seeing what Prime has been doing, what Amazon Prime has been doing, they've waded into these sports media waters. They've very quietly got daytime programming, be it Master Tesfazian or Bonjour Sports Talk. They're absolutely beta testing right now. And I think we're hyper-focusing on this Penn ESPN thing when ultimately it's going to go the way that a lot of people assume. There's going to be three companies running everything, and even in sports. Three companies that are going to be running your life. It's Google, it's Apple, and it's Amazon. And if every other marketplace is going by the way, who are we to say that sports won't be going that way either? Because those companies are so gigantic, they're going to end up controlling everything, including your daytime sports television.